again. Now, David Kim, that's right?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll talk about Volto accessibility for developers. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So if nobody claps at the end, I'll know how the talk went. So as Miguel mentioned, my name is David Kim. I am a developer from Romania, working for ODOWeb. And today I'm going to try to talk a little bit about Volto accessibility for developers. Before I like to start my actual talk, I would like to briefly mention the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The current version is 2.1, and it is consisting of 4 main principles. Our website should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Each principle itself is split into several guidelines, and you will find more info at the link that I've shared with you. Okay, so now why do I want to talk about accessibility with you? We had this year the launch of the new ea.europa website. I've been working for many years for European Union, the environmental agency, and we used to have a Plone site that was built with Plone 4, and from this year, we have a shiny new website that is using Plone 6 and Volto. When we are talking about building new websites, we have legal requirements and ethical considerations for our websites to be accessible. We can't just make nowadays something that is not accessible to the general, not just the general population, but also the people with disabilities. If you would like to check out our accessibility statement, you'll find it at the link that I have given in this slide. Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit about our website stack. As I was mentioning, our new website is no longer using Plone 4 and page templates, but is now using Volto. And that means that we are using a couple of technologies that are coming with Volto, such as React Semantic UI components. We are using the less Semantic UI for theming. And this is a bit of a problem because both technologies ship with accessibility issues. This slide, I'm going to leave it just for a couple of seconds, where I just handpicked a few GitHub issues where some people were complaining about some of the accessibility issues that they have found in these projects. Okay. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about solutions to test for accessibility issues and what we have on our hand. First of all, we have the ability to lint our code. We have our ability to write unit tests that can also integrate accessibility testing. We can test even in storybook components and also in our Cypress acceptance tests. But all of this is nothing compared to what we can do whenever we get to manual testing. Since we're talking about Volto, Volto mostly has us covered when it comes to having good batteries for accessibility testing. I'm going to mention just 3 items that are easily found. The ASLint JSX accessibility plugin for editors to use for code linting. Volto ships also with Cypress X, which allows us to use accessibility testing within our acceptance testing. And we can also take notice of how Volto is using GitHub Actions to run in a continuous integration mode the accessibility testing. I would like to start and show a little bit the ASLint JSX plugin for code linting. You can see the links if you want to get more information about the project. And in this small image that I have uploaded, we can see what happens in case I add an image tag where I don't have an alt attribute. The editor will immediately announce to me that I'm missing the alt attribute and I should do something about it. This is convenient as it is the first step to ensuring that my code is accessible. This is one of the pros of the linting plugin. It's fast and it runs automatically in your text editor. You don't even need to commit and push. It's already there as you work. And since it uses ESLint, which is known for having auto-fixing, that means that you can also have certain auto-fixes of accessibility issues. Of course, all of the tools that I'm about to present to you have some pros and cons, and the cons for this linting is that it's a static tool, so the issues that it catches are limited. It doesn't know about the compiled code. It only knows about some of the rules that it finds within our code in the editor. Then this is something that it's not enabled in Volto Core, but personally I like because Volto does ship with Jest for unit testing. And this Jest ask is a custom Jest matcher, which is using under the hood the Axe Core package that is used basically by any other tool that is testing for accessibility issues. If you'd like to know more info about the custom matcher, you can go at the link that I have given in the slide. And what are the pros that I think about this tool? First of all, I really like it because the tests are fast. When I compare it to something like Cypress, the test happens in 1 second, not maybe a minute until I start the stack. The problem is, the cons is that it's hard to test complex interactions. If you want to test for the hover action, that's going to be hard with Jest. Since it uses JS DOM, it's not suitable also for color testing, so you'll need to use something else. And when you write your tests, you'll have to mock any interaction with other components. Here we have a small snippet of Jest text that tests specifically for any accessibility issue. And I'm testing for the drop-down component, the basic component that was given into React semantic documentation. The first 3 lines are not important. What matters is what follows, and the fact that we need to require the Jest Axe. We then have to expect not to have any violations. Whenever we call our drop-down component to render, we're gonna await to get the result from that container and run it through the Axe plugin, and then we expect not to have any violations. Here's a sample output of the Jest test runner, and unfortunately, even by default, the drop-down component from semantic has accessibility issues. Next, I'm going to talk about Storybook. Personally, I like Storybook. It provides a sandbox to build and test visual components in isolation. The good thing now, unlike 2 years ago when I have presented what's new in Volto for developers, the setup for Storybook is done in all of Volto, not just core, but also the add-ons and the Volto project by using the Volto generators. The pros of Storybook is that you can use the story controls to provide options to your React component. Imagine that you have some props, if something should be primary or should go to the left or something like that, you can easily do so with the Storybook controls. The Storybook itself has plenty of plugins that it can use to enhance this developer experience. I can think of a few plugins such as the responsive design mode, where you can test the components as if you were on a mobile or a tablet, or the HTML plugin, which allows us to also see the output of our components. With Storybook add-on A11i plugin, you can get warnings as you interact with your component, and in a little bit, I'll show you that in a demo. And what is nice about the Storybook is that it can be hosted for free. We have several options such as GitHub Pages, but also Chromatic, which we are using at EEA, and these are the maintainers of Storybook, and they provide generous options for hosting for open source projects. Generous meaning free. Okay, now the cons is that it takes longer to run than just tests, and the testing isn't automatic. This is something that you have to do manually. You have to interact with the actual Storybook page. This is something a bit strange. It might be because of the version that ships with Volto, or it might be something from the tests that we have written. But we ran into a situation where we had a test that was bad, or used some sort of a control that I don't know what was exactly the error. And what happened is that all of the tests that followed afterwards had certain problems to some controls. And it was no real warning. You didn't really know. I had to find by trial and error that if I removed that test, then the other controls showed up. I would love to find out what happened, and if somebody is an expert here, get in touch with me. I'm eager to learn what I did wrong. And Storybook also has the ability, as I said, to run accessibility testing. But what I don't like about the testing there is that it requires some panel toggling, and you'll see what I mean immediately when I demo. The Storybook integration, because of Volto, is actually really easy nowadays. In case you don't have, in case you want to test for accessibility, all you need to do is to add this key in your package.json of your Volto project. And then in the Storybook main.js, you simply need to load the add-on into the add-on key, add-on list. And now I would like to demo a little bit the Storybook component. Okay. No. As you can see, what the accessibility plugin does is that you have this accessibility control panel right here at the bottom next to the controls, actions, and in our case also the rendered HTML. What is cool is that it will actually re-render in case you interact with the elements as long as you toggle. And I arrive here to my issue about needing though to toggle something. I would like to find, let's see if I can find something that failed. Let's see here. No, I can't find now. This is, no, in the Dropbox, okay. So we have 2 violations that Storybook showed to me that I have. What is cool is that if I play with the toggles, it will also highlight exactly where the accessibility error showed up. And if I click on the next item, if I go to HTML and now I go to accessibility, you see that I no longer have 2 violations. I only have 1 violation regarding the ARIA labels. I really wish I didn't have to toggle. that it would have been enough to simply click and then for the accessibility checking to re-render. If any of you know if there's something that can be done, again, get in touch with me and I would love to then do it properly. Okay? Enough testing of the storybook. If you would like to find more examples of stories written, we have a bunch of stories. First of all, hosted at ea.github.io. And if you are interested to see how we've written them, I also added the link to GitHub where we had our stories written. If you'd like to check out the Volto core stories, this is the link for you to visit. Next, I'm going to talk about Cypress Test Runner. This is an end-to-end test runner which verifies that all components of a system can run under real-world scenarios. This is quite cool, and I will tell you about the pros in a minute. It's really easy to run now due to the configuration being done in Volto Core and also the Volto projects. It is the most complete type of automated testing due to actually rendering the components in a real browser. And it has decent debuggability due to time travel of test snapshots. And when I'll demo, you will see what I mean about this. Some of the cons for me is that it takes a long time for tests to run. And sometimes tests can be flaky where you need to insert some wait timers. If you ever seen some pull requests in Volto Core where some random pull request failed, there's a good chance that it was a Cypress test that was sort of flaky and needed to have some wait timers increased. As I was mentioning, the built-in integration is done already by Volto through a Volto project. And accessibility testing is handled by the Cypress X plugin. I'm showing now a basic Cypress test that was written, and this is actually taken from Volto Core. If you look at the markup that is here, first of all, this test is doing something nice, which is ensuring that ci.injectAx is called before each test. That way, whenever you get to the actual testing, you don't need to repeat the injectAx command. And then you can navigate to a page, and you can tell it to check for any accessibility issues. And a little bit later, I will also show you an actual demo. If you need to run the Cypress tests, as every project that ships from Volto project, we have some main commands. You just run the main commands, and then you will get the Cypress test runner started. If you would like to see what Volto has written for accessibility testing, check out these two links. For the first one is the tests that are right now in core, and the second one will take you to a pull request where someone started adding more pages and more interactions that were tested by the Cypress X plugin. Okay, now that we talked about the automated tools, we're going to talk about manual testing for accessibility. Unfortunately, it's both the most important but also the most time-consuming type of testing. Many times you will do a few of the following. You will need to check color contrast and see if there's any warnings that were given by automated testing. You can't always rely on the automated testing. You need to see if the test was correct or not. Then if you are at the point where you're manual testing, you should always use the keyboard only to see if you can navigate your website. If it's possible, you should also use a screen reader. If you're on a Mac, use VoiceOver, since it ships with Mac. If you're on Windows, use NVDA, since it's a free program. And don't forget that you also need to zoom in to 200% and see if the text information is still visible in your website. Okay, now let's get to some practical tips. Before I start some of the things that the developers should do, I also want to mention that we can do anything and everything, but if the editors do not follow some sort of accessibility checklist guideline, then they will introduce accessibility problems. And that is something that it's not easily fixed by us. And I think you should take into consideration to create a checklist of items that the editors should follow whenever they have an article to publish, or they want to use certain items into their pages that they create. And I leave a link where you can get more information of what sort of checklists you could use. Okay, and now let's talk about the color contrast. We need, as developers, to ensure that there's enough contrast ratio between the foreground and the background. And this is actually quite convenient nowadays, because there are plenty of automated tools that we can use for color contrast checking. And even when we go manually, we always have the dev tools, and whenever we click on the colors, they'll tell us if it's accessible or not. I just want you to be aware of some situations where you might get some false positives. I know for us it happened whenever we were using a white text on an image background. That background, I don't know, maybe had since it was an image, it could go from one color to another, but the text itself was not inaccessible. And also, these automated tools don't really know how to handle colors whenever they contain also transparency, whether we're talking about the foreground or the background colors. And I would like to now show you a little bit of contrast testing. And for this, I'm actually going to use the Cypress test. And what is really cool about the testing, as I have showed you in, all I had to do was to add a color to an element in my page, and then write that check A1I command, and then the test runs, and it lets me know that there's a failure. If you go higher, there's this A11I error, and it says color contrast on one node. And if you click on it, it highlights exactly where's the contrast issue, and from here you can inspect with the developer tool and see, yeah, what other color you would use. And as I was saying about the time traveling, this is nice because you can go higher in the test phase and the test snapshot and see exactly what happened with the Cypress test. Next, a big issue that you will run into is having to do with keyboard navigation. And you should ensure that your site is navigable using only the keyboard. And of course, as with any accessibility task, you will have some challenges whenever you will deal with keyboard navigation. That is because React Semantic UI is not very keyboard friendly by default. And And the documentation does not help either. Even though the components themselves can be accessible, you are the one that has to create them in a way that that is actually accessible. And besides the semantic UI components that shipped and we can use in Volto, there are many situations where we have third-party components that we need to use, and a lot of times those will have poor keyboard navigation. And when I say this, for me, it comes to mind things like sliders or image galleries. So I'm going to give you now some examples of how you can improve the keyboard navigation accessibility. For instance, for the accordion from Semantic, the easiest would be to simply use a semantic HTML element which already has proper keyboard support. And this is a good thing from React Semantic component because you have the as prop, and there's nothing stopping you from saying that you want the title, instead of being rendered as a div, which is by default, to be rendered as a button. In case you're stubborn or you're trying to maintain backward compatibility, then you'll have to do a few extra steps that would not be needed in case you were using the buttons. First of all, you have to give it a role of a button. You have to add a tab index, otherwise the div will not be tabbable. And you also have to take into consideration that the user might press enter or spacebar on the title, and then you would want to simply open or close the accordion. So all of that was given by the button, but now we have to implement it ourselves. Then I want to talk about keyboard accessible modals, and by default modals are not really a good thing to use. People complain about modals as an element to use in web pages. And what they are usually, they are a pop-up dialog that are prompting you to perform an action. And you need to ensure that the focus moves from the content where you were to the pop-up area where the pop-up opened. And I would like to give you an example soon of how inaccessible the modals examples are from the React Semantic UI documentation page. And this is nice, the storybook, because again, you can use it for accessibility testing. I made an example specifically for this demo, and I wanted to add a couple of links which are tabbable, and then I have a button which will trigger a modal. Watch what happens when I hit enter. The modal opens, but if I hit tab, I don't know if you can see, but the next element was actually the link instead of being inside of the modal. And now if I tab, I also cannot use the keyboard to turn off the modal. I made another example where I made the modal to be a bit more accessible. And let's see what happens whenever I hit enter. Now I am focused on the page, on the dialogue, and if you look, now the close button is also focusable. In the previous example, it wasn't. You can close it, and if I hit escape, that also works. And look at the fact that now I am taken exactly to the position where I've opened the dialog, which was the button. This is something that I forgot to present here in the unfocusable, the one that's not properly accessible. When I hit no, I'm actually taken to the first element. So I was not at the point where I was when I've opened the model. Okay. What I had to do to make that model more accessible was actually quite easy, I would say. And I'm not saying this is the best way to do it, but this is a way that you can do. You should create a reference for the trigger, which in our case was the button, and also for the modal acting as the pop-up. And as I was saying, although React semantic components can be accessible, they're not by default. You have to be the one that codes the accessibility in. And in our case, by using the onMount and onUnMount, onMount, I make sure that I focus on the first child of the pop-up. So therefore, I'm no longer kept in the page focus, and I'm taking to the pop-up focus. And on onMount, I'm going back and focusing on my trigger, which was the button. And this is all I had to do in order to make my, my component accessible. So some tips for keyboard accessible components. As I was mentioning, look at the example pages and play with the settings that the components offer. Some methods like close on board, blur, on mount, or on open. And make sure that you implement your own callback to check for enter or spacebar keys for opening or closing an interactive component. If you cannot use HTML elements with proper tab support, then you will need to use the tab index to make sure that that element is tabbable. Next, we have to deal with testing with screen readers. And here, the problem is that we have the question, what trips screen readers? And as we'll find out, kind of a lot. First of all, what can trip ARIA, what can trip the screen readers are ARIA roles, and I mean bad ARIA roles. And if you will follow the links that I have given, you will see that even the Y3C will recommend that it's better not to use any ARIA role at all than to use one that is bad. And I would like to quickly show something. If I use the Axe DevTools for the drop-down element that I simply took from the React semantic component demo, you will see that it will say that it uses some ARIA roles that it shouldn't use. So in our case, Semantic did worse, that they provided this and you can't really get rid of it, rather than allowing us to add an ARIA role where we need it. Also, you have to be careful whenever you're using a screen reader about the invisible focusable elements. And I will show you a demo, actually. If we look at this carousel and I interact with it, you will see that the tabbing order works fine. But look what happens if I remove the visibility CSS rule. I press 3 times, and all of those slides are actually hidden, and I finally arrive at one that is actually active and should have been accessible. So you have to be careful and provide options in order to ensure that the element that is hidden from the screen is not read by the either by the screen reader or when using keyboard navigation. If you'd like to see how we did the carousel listing, we have an open source add-on, and you can check there the carousel listing. Okay, another thing that can trip screen readers, or that give a sort of bad behavior, is whenever we are missing HTML elements or attributes. This is an accessible table example for a screen reader, and it requires a couple of things. First of all, a caption, then to have a scope on the headers to say if the headers are for the columns or for the rows. And unfortunately, for our Volto table block, we have the following issues. We have no ability to set the table caption. We cannot designate a cell as a header. There's also an example where you could set a header vertically and not only horizontally. And you cannot set the scope on the headers. And since this is such a simple component, I would love for the community to add a pull request to fix these issues for Volto table to Volto core. If you would like to see how a blind person interacts with tables, check out this link and you'll see exactly why we need these elements. Okay, then we have some accessibility testing helpers. If you want to dive more into accessibility testing by automated browser tools, this is a list of plugins that I have tried and I recommend to you. There will be a lot of overlap because most of them are using Axe Core, but each one has one individual thing that is not part of the other, so you'll have to test them yourself and see what works for you. So now I arrived to the point that there are also issues in Volto core itself regarding accessibility, not just in the React components. And what's nice about the Volto core is that there are two ways where you can see the accessibility problems in Volto. First of all, there's a Volto project where there are 30-some issues that you can check. And then there's also a tag of 99 accessibility that some people from the community use. So check either one of them, and if there's something that you know how to fix, then as my slide says, help is needed and wanted. And I would like to congratulate the people from Red Turtle because they have started to test and add issues also for the toolbar and the editing interface, not just the Volto anonymous side. Okay, this is it. My talk is done. If anything was useful and you've learned anything, you can email me at my email and showcase any improvements that you have made to your accessibility in your own projects.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Very interesting talk. Any questions?
Thank you for the informative presentation. You had a lot of testing tools that were helping you with automating the accessibility testing, but you also said that you do also manual testing. So I was a bit curious, like how often do you do manual testing? Do you do it like during the development, or maybe do you have like maybe a development cycle and at the end you do one big manual testing cycle with the screen reader stuff? Yeah.
What we end up doing, because we had this new website launch, was to have dedicated accessibility issue tickets. And whenever we wrote the accessibility statement, we added tickets, started testing, both manually and by a professional company. Then we had the issues added, and we started working on them. But also, I was doing it every time I went to make, I don't know, a change to one of our add-ons or something like that, because once you know and you realize of these issues, you really want to fix them. And yeah, that's kind of the workflow.
Any more? Okay, thank you, David.